right. Hello, friends. Patrick McFarland here with Trey of Subversion. We're starting this off really well.
Indeed.
This is episode 78 of the Liberty Weekly podcast, and it will also appear on Subversion, right?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's at libertyweekly.net/78.
And I have no domain chosen for that yet, so it'll just be on subversionwebcast.com.
Brilliant. Yeah, so we've been chilling here. Trey's the only member of the Libertarian Union that actually lives near me, so we try and get together as often as we can, and it's been a great time today. Trey is actually great at kind of teasing out my thoughts like you did. So the last episode we did together was on my domestic violence paper. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the law again today. Trey, you did such a great job on that episode, dude. Like,
well, thanks.
That's one of my favorites, for real.
Yeah, it did end up kind of getting fleshed out really very organically, I think. I think that was supposed to be sort of like a 50-50 crossover episode, and it just kind of turned into me interviewing you more or less. And
you're a great interviewer. Like you, yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Some good talks.
Yeah, so I think what me and Patrick really wanted to get down to today was just, I wanted to sort of pick his brain about just law in general. And I suppose just to kind of kick it off, Patrick, you're a anarchist libertarian, but you're also working to be involved in the legal system. So I guess I'm just sort of curious how you square your study and practice of law with libertarianism, because you have this hardcore idea of an ideal world that we could live in. And I would imagine that's a code of law definitely fits into that. So I'm just kind of curious where those overlaps are.
Yeah, it's really tough, actually, because if you are admitted to the bar, you are an agent of the court. That's part of it. And you have duties to the court. And in my defense, I decided to be an attorney before I became a Rothbardian libertarian. So it's really hard. It's really hard. And especially because, and I've been trying to tackle things like this in the podcast recently too, with bringing on Rayford Davis, which was another great episode that I really enjoyed talking to him. Want to have him on again. But yeah, how do you square that away with libertarian ideals? It's a really hard question. And yeah. I think just that we know the nature of the state is they have a monopoly on the court system, and they have to sanction it, whether you're doing alternative dispute resolution or other alternatives to litigation. They have to sanction it, I think, at some point. So it's not really an interactive relationship, and I've been trying to balance this with. I had a conversation about legal positivism, and I kind of ranted about that in an episode for an argument that I got into on Facebook about legal positivism. And on one side, being a voluntarist, you really want to have all of these natural law arguments as to you walk in the courtroom and you're going to have this great monologue to the judge about, natural rights and how victimless crimes are not crimes and how we have duties to disobey unjust laws, in the words of Thomas Jefferson. But at the end of the day, the judge is still going to look at precedent and look at what other state monopolized courts have said. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the way that I try and frame it is that at the end of the day, people need justice, and you're providing a service. And that's justice. That's representation. It's justice. And in our system, that justice is monopolized by the courts. Mm-hmm. And then oftentimes, you're going to get people with warrants, especially in criminal law, where the only way they can get the kind of relief that they want is going through the court system. And, I'd love to walk into a courtroom with a great diatribe about natural rights and, that kind of... and objective morality, or however you want to frame it, that it just when you play the game of the beast, you got to play by their rules. Mm-hmm. And as much as I hate legal positivism, that we live in that world, and if I really want to help people, which I really do, I feel like you got to.
Yeah, and I know that I've noticed, just you getting sort of attacks from other libertarians almost. So there's this purity test that you have to live up to among your libertarian friends who you care probably very much for, your audience is libertarian, so you have to sort of accommodate your audience. But then at the same time, you have this career that you're trying to build. I think that there's a sense that you're playing with your public persona very carefully, I would say. That it seems like you don't want to get yourself into kind of a bind with your reputation. So I guess I'm just kind of curious about that too. Like, do you have to sort of, does your worry about potential clients or employers in the future sort of hold you back a little bit from the content that you produce?
Yeah, it does. Especially, but no. And I've confronted these things head on. Like, that's why I brought on Rayford Davis. And I guess I'm really working through it in my own mind. And that's kind of what my show is to me, is like a journal of sorts. More so for me than even for the audience. And I feel like I've been pandering lately towards, because I am afraid of, what to say. I don't think I've been pandering in a certain sense, but I've been trying to tread lightly, but at the same time confront these things head on, I do worry about it. The area that I want to practice in is very conservative, so they get a lot of my like, I'm from that, I get that. But at the end of the day, people who are seeking representation in criminal matters, they're no friends of the state.
Sure.
At the same time, there's a lot of small business litigation and family law stuff. It's a lot different because I don't ever want to work for the state. And so that gives me a little more credence.
Yeah,
sure. A little more wiggle room, if you will. But no, I really just want to be a positive influence on the community.
Sure.
And I think that at the end of the day, people will see that, because I want to help people. I want to bring them justice. And that's what voluntarism kind of is about too, just helping people.
Right.
Really, and having and Jeff Dice talks about this all the time, is that we are not adverse to social institutions, just state involved ones, but we need to be involved on that level. I think, whether it's with the Lions Club or Kiwanis, or I see a future in that for me, as long as those institutions aren't state-based,
Yeah, right. And I suppose going into the career that you are, there is sort of, there are two sides that I suppose you could play on, right? You could be on more of the criminal defense side. I don't know. There's probably several different subfields that you can go into as a lawyer. But what I'm kind of getting at, as far as like the raw dichotomy of the private sector versus the public sector, at least you kind of get to choose which party that you go to represent, because yeah, I mean, with your credentials, you could probably go and work towards a career to become a prosecutor, for the state, or you could spend your entire life kind of defending people from the tyranny of the state. So yeah, I suppose it could be you could become a slave to the state or fight them off in what you do.
But what level am I facilitating it by remaining an agent of the state?
Sure.
Or an agent of the court is what I mean, because you owe certain duties to the court. In professional responsibility, you owe certain duties to the court and to opposing counsel. And so
are there ever any points, I'm curious about this, are there ever any points where something that you say to the public on your podcast could affect your credentials and things like that, like just talking? Because I've heard of people getting kicked off of like juries for talking about nullification, for example, like just silly stuff like that. I guess I'm just kind of curious if there's some sort of responsibility that the court holds you to that restricts your freedom of speech in some way, or any that you know of.
I hope not. Like,
see, I just don't know anything about this world, so I guess I'm just kind of curious, because with legalese, it's like, I don't know, you're kind of walking on eggshells. So I guess I'm just curious if your credentials are ever kind of in jeopardy for reasons sort of vaguely associated with that.
They are, yes. And You study this in professional responsibility class, where there was an
wow.
instance. Yeah,
There's even a class.
no, there is called, and it's required too. Although Wisconsin does not require attorneys to take the professional responsibility examination to get admitted, like other states do. It's called the MBRE, the multi-state. I don't know what the terms are for, but no, we did study this, and there was. So when you graduate from law school, you have to take the bar and apply to the Board of Bar Examiners, who do a professional fitness character and fitness examination on you. So I've applied to the bar. I'm going to take the bar exam in July. I had to send in every single residence that I ever lived at, every job I've ever had, every boss I've ever had. They contact. I had 6 6 character references of people that you've known for longer than 2 years who haven't been your boss or related to you or could possibly be related to you in the future. So 6 of them. And what else was it? Yeah, every crime I've ever committed, which I haven't any. Although I've been accused of the lack of registration. That was last summer. I had this. I don't know if I told this story on the podcast. We'll have to get to it. But yeah, so those were both dismissed. It was just not failure to register. And I was registered on my truck.
Okay.
So in July of 2016, I went to the DMV in Hudson, Wisconsin, and I got my tags for my truck. But they gave me the wrong sticker. They gave me June instead of I think it was June instead of July, and I was registered through July. So when I got the renewal notice in July of 2017, it said you're up at the end of July. Well, little did I know, I didn't think to check the tags. The tag said June, so my truck was parked on the road, and it got a ticket for lack of registration. I wasn't even driving the car, and this asshole parking enforcement officer gave me 2 tickets, 2 separate days. It was like one was on the 13th and one was on the 14th or something, 17th. And so I got them dismissed because I read the law, and I had 2 excuses, like statutory excuse. This is an aside, sorry, but
it's okay.
I had 2 statutory defenses. One was just that I was mistakenly notified. That was in the statute. And the other one was that I registered within 10 days of getting the ticket, so they waived it anyways. So. But I had to go through the rigmarole. I had to take a day off work, and go down to the courthouse, speak with the hearing officer. She was very surprised to see me there because I was a PD in that county, and I had worked with. So I showed up in a suit and everything. It was stupid.
Yeah.
They dismissed it, but yeah. So where was I going with this? Just basically so yes, that is the duty you owe to. So you apply to the bar. They do this. They require everything but a colonoscopy, essentially, and then you have to pass the bar exam. There are certain constitutional rights, like First Amendment implications, when it comes to the bar. So nothing that I say could get me not admitted.
Sure.
And if
nothing
there were
explicit.
Yeah. And what we studied in PR class was a case where there was this pinko commie who was part of actively overthrowing the U.S. government, who had done things. Yeah. And this is, I'm all about peace and non-aggression. I'm not about yes, I want to dissolve the U.S. government, but I'm not about to take up arms anytime soon to do so.
Right.
So it and I have deep ties to the legal community too. Just growing up, and so people know me around here. People know me in my practice area. They know I'm a good person.
Yeah. Right. So I suppose I'm sort of curious because police officers they are the enforcers of law, right? But it seems so often that they only understand enough so that they can weasel their way into convictions or at least charges, right? So from your perspective and what you've learned, how how much responsibility is put on police officers to actually understand the law that they're enforcing? Because the way I'm seeing it, these guys just kind of go through like a 9-month certification program or something. It's like, I don't know. It's sort of ironic that it's like 9 months, because it's like the term of a pregnancy. You know what I mean? And these people just go into these sort of academies to learn how to be arbiters of the law, but I'm not so sure that they go through as much training as you've gone through to even understand. And I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of areas that that you don't quite grok yet in the legal field, but you know, you're 4 years in and just getting started, but these people just sort of get to go to some short certification program and come out with a gun and a badge. So I guess I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, for real, at the end of the day, you have to realize that the state being involved, you know, or not, human beings are fallible, no matter, you know, where they are, who they are, what organization they're a part of. There's a lot of mistakes that are made because human beings are fallible. At the same time, the Fourth and Fifth Amendment stuff that the police officers have to go through is a very small part of the law. Mm-hmm. And I know they have to do case studies. Like, they have to know Terry v. Ohio by the back of their hand. You know, reasonable, articulable suspicion for the stop. I don't know, man. Like, I know part of when it comes to use of excessive force, and I think I covered this in one of my episodes, the law has to be clear enough for police officers to make snap decisions. Yeah. And when it comes to excessive use of force, that's part of or qualified immunity. That's part of the thing, is that, well, the law has to be clear enough so that police officers can apply it. I guess my answer would just be that it's a very narrow part of the law that police officers have to know. Basically, Fourth Amendment jurisprudence, Fifth Amendment, they have to know the use of force continuum. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the case, the use of force case, the first one where the guy was jumping over the fence and the police officer shot him. And was that Gardner or something?
Not sure. I'm sure that kind of stuff happens all the time, but I don't know the specific case you're talking about.
Yeah, there was a case. It was like the Hallmark use of force case. Okay. I can't remember. But yeah, and that's so. Yes, it is a very narrow part of the law. I think they have protocols, but at the end of the day, human beings are fallible. Yeah. And I guess this is something that I say too to everyone in my show, is that the law is not written in a foreign language. You know, it's written in English, and it's not cryptic. There is legalese, but there's a dictionary. You know, all of these rulings are available to the public, and I guess that's part of what my show is the law is not that complicated. It is complicated, but it's not that complicated.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you know, you are talking about, you're asking your police officers to go above and beyond. You know, it's a war. It is. It's the war on drugs, you know. And they know that it's an unwinnable. I think at the kernel of every police officer, they know the war on drugs is futile and unwinnable. But at the end of the day, you know, it's us versus them. We're in a war. I got to get the drugs. You know, so I'm going to use everything that I can think of to bend the rules. Human action, human motivations and preferences, and you know, that directed behavior. They're going to play with those rules to get the arrest.
Right, because their advancement in their own career is dependent on how many convictions that end up coming from their arrests. So I mean, if we think about this in an Austrian Misesian kind of way, then they're incentivized quite a bit to just bend the rules however they see fit to get that done. So yeah, and I guess what I was trying to sort of flesh out was maybe that police officers kind of have an impossible job in some way, because they're not lawyers. You know, they're just kind of, I guess if I'm going to use some kind of crude analogy, they're kind of the junkyard dog, or like, you know, rabid dog on a leash of the state. Mm-hmm. And, you know, all these videos that we see coming out of police violence. I don't know. It almost seems like there's two responses that you see in the comment sections of those videos. It's either it's like, oh well, what did the person who's being assaulted do? Like there's some sort of there are certain things that a person could have done to deserve that kind of behavior. But yeah, it's almost like there are some people that no matter what the police are doing, there's nothing that they could do wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
because they are the arbiters of law, and how could you ever question what this great country, you see what I'm getting at?
Oh, yeah. The sentiment of, well, you shouldn't have broke the law. You deserve what happened to you.
You shouldn't have
because
resisted.
You broke the law, or you should have resisted, or shouldn't have resisted.
Mm-hmm.
Or the thing that really struck me, I was watching a Larkin Rose video where he talks about this, where agents of the state will literally, the responsibility for their actions literally leaves them. They don't consider what they're doing as being their action. They're just carrying out the law, man.
Yep.
It wasn't me that restrained, tasered that person while he was in a restraining chair in a Georgia jail.
Mm-hmm.
It was the law that did it. Well, they broke the law, so I had to, ransack their car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of sad that I don't know. You really want to have compassion for soldiers and police officers because I think there is a lot that's out of their control, and their job is sort of just to follow orders, But it sort of falls on deaf ears to people like ourselves who are radical individualists, sort of libertarian types, that it just is way too convenient of an excuse to just be able to divert your like that's just way too convenient. Nobody else gets to do that in life. Nobody else just gets to say that it's the Nuremberg defense, really.
Mm-hmm.
That it's completely acceptable to do something just because you were ordered to by someone above you. It's just sort of like it's not really, I want to say fair, but that's not really what I'm trying to get at. It's not right. It's not right that a certain group of people just get to divert the authority to some, if you don't like it, call your politicians. Like, that doesn't really work very well on me, because you have every opportunity as a police officer to protest civilly in whatever way that in carrying out your duties. You could decide to not arrest people for nonviolent crimes, but they do it every day. So it's just kind of like, I'm not really all that sympathetic to the people that are just like, well, get a hold of your politicians and have them change the laws, because what I'm asking is that people stop enforcing those, pretty destructive laws. I'm just kind of spitballing here.
Well, no, I have a lot more sympathy for veterans and military than I do police officers.
Oh, sure.
Although,
yeah,
and we
absolutely.
talked about that before, earlier before we started recording. But yeah, and Rayford Davis talks about this all the time, is that you're taught to fear everything. When you think that every time you interact with the public that you're going to get killed, that there's the potential for you to be killed.
Yeah, and I've brought this up on my show several times. There's this video, and it changed the way that I see how policing is done, and I almost kind of understand why police officers react the way that they do and why they are so fast to shoot, is because there was this journalist who was doing a story, and he was being very critical of police shootings. I think it was during the Ferguson issue with Michael Brown, and they brought him on this like mock police training thing, and they put this journalist through the process. And at one point, there's like a time when he goes to question a suspect, and the guy just like goes behind the car for like 2 seconds and comes back around and shoots him. And he's like, "Now you're dead." Like, the police trainer guy was like, "Oh, now you're dead." And I'm like, well, yeah, no wonder these police are so quick to shoot, because this is how they're trained. They're trained to think that anybody and everybody is just 2 seconds away from shooting them, Well, so I can totally see why they would.
It's because they're fighting a war.
Yeah.
Right. By their own rhetoric, And
yeah.
when you're a soldier, what do? You kill people. That's your job, And when you're carrying a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and I've said that before. But like, and Rayford really drove that home for me, is that, you know, you're dealing with people like the On Killing guy, the Dave Grossman guy, and he's
that police trainer guy
he's a psychopath.
He basically just gives people an excuse to use a heavy hand in policing, more or less.
Well, and Rayford was saying, when you show up, you know, all your training is like, oh, everyone's trying to kill you. You should be afraid all the time, like fear of your life. And and I guess I want to relate that to police or to the military too, because similarly, being pro-troop means I think that the lives of our guys are so valuable that they should not be thrown away in vain. And I viewed all the conflicts. None of them are worth it. None of them, in my mind, are worth one human soldier, you know, one human life, much less an American guy. But I was watching War Machine on Netflix with Brad Pitt, and towards the end of the movie, they're in some Pashtun village in, was it Helmand province, and the Taliban are there. They drop leaflets. The U.S. Army guys drop leaflets beforehand to say, hey, if you're a Pashtun villager, get out, you know, because we're coming to get the Taliban. And the Taliban guys were there. Are we recording still? Oh, yeah. Well,
sorry.
Oh, no worries. The Taliban guys were there, and you know, there's some sniper fire from the Taliban, and there's a soldier who was questioning why we're there. In the beginning of the movie, he's this black guy, and he's like, why are we here? I can't tell the difference between the Pashtun and the Taliban, and I don't want to kill civilians, but I want to kill the enemy. You know, I'm a soldier. That's my job. I'm a Marine. I kill people. Like, so we're putting people in these situations where they're trying to do their job, like the Marines, you know, and in the way, there's people that die in the crossfire. And at the end of the day, those Marines have to deal with the fact that they were just trying to do what they're told, but they ended up killing this Pashtun child, you know, and that's in the video, you know, and at the end of the day, the soldier has to deal with the fact that he was the one that brought the physical manifestation into the world of pulling the trigger and killing that boy, you know, and that's not fucking fair.
Right. Yeah, and it's not very fun to be the one to try to communicate that to that person. You know what I mean? Because us as libertarians, like we were just talking about, it is the individual making that choice, and we want people to realize that the power that they hold as an individual in that situation. But yeah, I mean, that person is just so convinced that that's the right thing to do. So it's just so hard to bridge that gap between what's right and what these people think is right. You know, it's just really hard to be able to reach people when, and especially when we have the compassion as libertarians that, you know, and I think that most libertarians genuinely do care for both the people that we're sending over there and putting in these terrible situations, and the people overseas who are probably just confused and scared, and are caught in the crossfire of all this. You know, but one thing that I did want to get to, and this has been something I've been meaning to talk to you about on the show for a while, and with the sort of confusion in the libertarian world between libertarian and conservative, because there are a lot of people who think that they're libertarians, and I hate to pull the purity test kind of thing, but I mean, it's true that there are people who are conservatives that think that they're libertarians, and they're the types that listen to like Ben Shapiro and I don't know, Glenn Beck, those types. And when I've been talking to them about criminal justice issues, and I more or less am just sort of talking about the frustration of how the sheer number of people who get locked in cages for nonviolent crimes. One common thing that I'll get is just, oh, well, the people within this system are, you know, they're committing a crime, they're doing something that's illegal, and they take the moralization out of that entirely, which I almost find impossible to do because I just don't think it's right to, because we have such rigid views of property rights that's just an illegitimate use of force in the first place. But the way that they see things is, well, they committed a crime, A, and then B, most of them pled guilty to that crime. So it stands to reason that no one was really a victim, that the system did exactly what it was supposed to. They gave them due process. They gave them the presumption of innocence, and they pled guilty to a crime that was on the books. And if you're for any kind of system of liberty, then you're for, a system of law, and those laws have to be followed. This whole line of reasoning, right? So I guess I'm just kind of curious to see your thoughts on that, because it really does bother me that there are people who identify, and these are the type of people that will say, I am libertarian, but then there's also this whole fraudulent system of criminal justice, or that we call criminal justice rather. So yeah, I guess I'm just kind of curious of how you view that issue. Just because we are given some sort of presumption of innocence allegedly, and because people are given due process, does that mean that it's right what's happening?
First, on the due process issue, I love due process. I mean, I'm a supporter of due process. Obviously, we need a presumption of innocence. Does that exist in our system? ? But due process doesn't mean that the result is just, that it results in justice. What if, and Thomas Jefferson, stated that we have a duty, a moral obligation to disobey unjust laws. And, what if let's see, trying to think of something benign. What if growing hostas was illegal? The plant, the hosta, it's just, well, what if we brought you into court and presumed that you were innocent, and we gave you, the ability to confront your accuser, we let you cross-examine people, we let you give testimony, and the jury found you guilty of growing the hosta, and they put you in prison for that. Is that justice just because you had due process? Or does the anti-hosta growing law, is that, just?
Right.
I guess that would be my answer.
Yeah, and that's kind of just the thing, is a lot of these law and order conservative types, it's like they just fetishize statutory law to a certain point, where it's just like their brains just fry, and that's all they care about is whether it was a law or not. And so that's the big thing that's been brought up with the immigration debate, especially just in the past couple days. I mean, because it sounds like there is some sort of formal policy with the Trump administration now that they are willfully just trying to separate families, which I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to say
truth is of that,
right?
Or, yeah.
Because to me, it seems like that's probably always happened.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it would stand to reason that would be true, because we've been deporting people from the borders, I don't know, for as long as we've had a national identity, I would imagine. So how is this a unique time that we're in with our immigration policy? I'm just not sure if it's true. But anyway,
that's the kind of rot at the center of identity and partisan politics, right? There was an article on Zero Hedge either yesterday or today that was talking about this, and it was the picture of the kids in the dog cage, basically. So
yeah.
We're putting, I don't know, Mexican or Central American children into dog cages, and the title of the article was "Liberals decry Trump immigration policy, but Obama was doing it." That was the main sticking point, was, well, liberals are hypocrites because they're condemning this policy because Obama did it and they said nothing. When what the article should have been, the headline should have been is, it's wrong to put people in cages. Why, that's the rot of partisan politics, is,
right.
You get into.
And you can, of course, at that point also be like, oh yeah, and by the way, liberals, once you have their attention, be like, oh yeah, hey, liberals, by the way, you were letting this happen.
Yeah, under Obama.
and nobody said anything, because both of those points are valid, but it's not necessarily, it's not as strong of a point coming from a conservative, because, you know, it doesn't seem like they're really, I don't know. I think libertarians are the only ones that can ever stand for these issues consistently, you know.
Well,
conservatives
are just trying to win political bounty points, like 10 points if you point out a liberal inconsistency, but ignore your own, or I find it really funny that conservatives appeal to legal positivism in that way, and now the term legal positivism has entered the Liberty Weekly lexicon. Now everyone I've known about this for a while, I don't know, wasn't talking about it, but legal positivism is very left leaning of a concept. I find like it began with the technocrats, it's my very bird's eye view rough understanding of it is that Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., I think he might have been one of the justices that said 3 generations of imbeciles is enough in the Buck v. Bell sterilization case. But these liberal technocratic justices at the helm of the progressive movement are legal positivists. Mm-hmm. It's a eugenics kind of technocratic centralized control kind of thing. So it's funny that conservatives, to me, it's funny to me that they would appeal to, well, it's the law that was made by a technocratic judge, so you got to follow it. The legislature made it, to hell with natural rights or, objective morality or our Christian values.
Oh, sure. But if ever there is a law that they don't like, they're the first to bring up those first principles. And all of a sudden, first principles matter when it's something that is a pet issue of their own. Yeah.
They're hypocrites.
So, yeah. And so, and that's why I kind of think that it's little foolish, because us as libertarians, we tend to think that we have more inroads with conservatives, and I think that's only true on a couple issues. And the reasoning always is that you can talk to conservatives because they understand this fundamental thing about the state not doing things quite right.
But they don't.
But
they seem like they do, but they don't. I don't
think that they really do consistently. Because I've seen so many people with MAGA hashtags in their bio and stuff like that, calling for just some really basic, I don't know, with the whole trade protectionist thing that's going on in America right now. I mean, they talk about the federal government as if its responsibility is there to protect their jobs and keep people who weren't born in America out of America unless they go through some rigmarole, So, and as far as I'm concerned, someone in Southern California shouldn't have to jump through a bunch of hoops just to get some cheap laborer to pick their fruit for them, because that is a big part of why immigrants come here, is to do labor that we otherwise don't want to do, and labor that no matter how much you paid Americans, they probably wouldn't do for the amount that a Mexican migrant farmer would. Nobody's going to pick strawberries and tomatoes for $2 an hour. And I would challenge any American to go and do that job. You know what I mean? So there is I don't know. Obviously that's sort of leaving out the entire thing that conservatives have with immigration, which is that they're sucking up social resources, which obviously for us libertarians is pretty easy to confront. I mean, you don't have redistributive programs like that. So,
well, Andrew Kern, our friend from the Principled Libertarian on Facebook, I should include a link in the show notes page for that, because he's doing a lot of really great work. He's a very well-read, intelligent individual. Mm-hmm. I think he's a farmer. He lives a mile south of the cities from here. So, yep. Smart guy, very well-read, goes through books like Stephen Clyde. Yeah. And but yeah, I mean, he was just saying that where does this idea come from that immigrants automatically will get here and vote in a larger government? Because he did have a study, and I'm not one for statistics per se, because we already talked about that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But he was saying that this tended to support the fact that, you know, a lot of Mexicans especially actually have more conservative values than conservatives do.
Yeah.
And actually immigrants really don't vote any more than anyone else. And I don't know. My big thing is that, well, if who votes for bigger government? Fucking everybody. Like, if you want to deport immigrants, yeah. If you wanted to, if you're worried about people voting in bigger government, then why don't you deport all of the college professors, you know, and look inwards. Conservatives vote for bigger government. Mm-hmm. Liberals vote for bigger government. Libertarians vote for bigger government. Everybody votes for bigger government.
That's a really good point.
Ransack the universities. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no. And I know that there are some allegations of undocumented immigrants voting, which, I guess that's a problem. But I guess for me,
I don't care. I don't care who votes.
Yeah,
you know?
Because if voting is just a means to an end to me as a libertarian, and I don't even fetishize it as this kind of like, you know, institution that needs to be, because I don't necessarily think that anyone has a right to vote. And the reason for that is it goes back to those first principles for me, that my property rights are not up for debate. They're not really, you know, the people who have perhaps some sort of say in what I do on my property would be people that live really close to me. You know, my neighbors, I can see them having concerns for things that I'm doing on my property. And that's why we have some sort of like local homeowners associations. Not that those are good all the time necessarily.
Or nuisance actions. You know, if and I think that nuisance actions are held up by libertarian principles, that if your enjoyment of the land is cut in half, you can't enjoy your property because your neighbor is loud, you know, or if your neighbor that is directly coming against and depreciating the value of your home in tangible ways.
Sure.
If your neighbor over here was burning tires, right, and there was a black smog all over your house all day long, you know.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who seem to be just caricatures of libertarians who almost they don't even want those kinds of rules because they believe that literally any restriction on the things you do on your property are anti-libertarian in some way, which, you know, I don't think, at least I'd like to think that I don't want to live in a world where people can just, you know, do whatever they want without any kind of consequences, because, you know, there are externalities that, you know, like you talked about burning tires in your yard or something, like, yeah, that does affect other people. And, you know, to the whole thing with like HOAs is, you know, like painting your house a weird color or something. Like, I just don't see the problem with having a formal agreement when you buy a house or, you know, developers build a development, that there are just certain colors that you can paint your house because that's what everybody agrees on, because it's going to preserve the property values of all those houses in that neighborhood. And I don't really think that that's a bad thing.
No, if you don't
can't
like
paint
it,
your house purple. Like,
yeah, if you don't like it, you know, don't buy a house there.
And I guess, I mean, just coming back to what really matters to me, like, I just don't see the point in some libertarians taking up, like, dying on that hill of painting your house purple when there's like wholesale property and like life destruction happening everywhere, you know. Not to say that they don't care about those things too, but it just seems like what's kind of more important.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, the war issue was the most important.
Right.
And I, like I said before, when I first got here, we've been chatting all day, but I'm really grateful that you and Kyle were able to wake me up to the war issue, because even the last time, I forget which episode it was where we did the sit down. It was like last fall or something.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
I knew fuck all about foreign policy. I mean,
yeah.
You were telling me about the Pashtun villagers and, you know, the how they were being imposed upon by the northern minority, this Afghan nationals of a totally different ethnic group, and I was sitting here like, this is so what? I couldn't even follow it, like.
Yeah.
And now, like, oh yeah, goddamn, that's the most important to me, you know, like.
Right. Yeah, and the fucked up thing about that, leading it back into law, is that these wars are all kind of, they're not even really fought by soldiers. The soldiers and the generals in the military aren't necessarily the ones pulling the trigger, so to speak. It's lawyers in the Pentagon.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so kind of going back to that whole thing about how, going into law as a profession, you have a choice to either become part of the Leviathan or be one of the people that's fighting to defend the little guy, or even the big guy. Like let's say there are plenty of corporations that are getting, completely screwed by the state, and for no reason. There are plenty of just fine large businesses who are getting screwed too. So I don't want to leave out the big guys who are doing everything they're right by people too.
Well, I kind of thought about, in the last few weeks I've been going through a lot of like life-changing things with graduating and being done with school, and now studying for the bar exam, which sucks, by the way. Like, I was thinking about it, and like, so in our society, who's the most powerful person? Why are lawyers assholes? Because we wield all the power in society. Like, why do lawyers have a chip on their shoulder? Because we speak the language of the state, at least, not, that wasn't the right way to phrase it, but we feel like we have this certain kind of knowledge that is hidden from the rest of society. And because of that, we get to work, we get to be part of something that other people don't understand. Mm-hmm. That wields coercive influence over their lives. Mm-hmm. And I can interact with that system, and I know how the system works and how to wield it, and you don't. Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could file a complaint and pay the court fees and sue someone, but I could do it, and it's no skin off my back.
Right. Because you know how to navigate it.
That gives you a chip on your shoulder, and I guess it makes you realize that in our kind of society, if you have that power, you're really important to society. Like, legal relationships exist in the world whether you recognize they do or not. Mm-hmm. And they govern everything that you do every single day.
Yeah.
And whether you realize it or not. And, and learning how to see that is like reading the code in the Matrix. It really is. And like, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, I think. So
sure. Right on. Well,
so you want to go ahead and do a plug, man.
I make a show called Subversion Webcast. I've been on a bit of a hiatus lately, but I want to get back into doing more long form, sort of documentary style stuff, having some more guests on and putting out content more regularly. So you can find the show at subversionwebcast.com, and check us all out at the Libertarian Union. We're growing. Got Luke Tatum now with us.
Great guy.
Yeah, Nick Picone now, who has more of a music-oriented podcast, doing something that I kind of tried to do, but he's doing it a lot better. Him and Liz are doing a really good job chatting about music. I always like hearing what they have to say. A lot of really good stuff at the Libertarian Union. So check it out, and thanks for having me. Yeah,
definitely, dude. And I'm moving at the end of this summer, so like hopefully we can do this again before that happens. But
I'm sure we will.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of I should do. So don't forget about our DonorSee project. So DonorSee is a charitable application for your cell phone where you can actually see videos of the people that you're. It's like Uber for charity.
Yeah, it's a really interactive charity experience. You're not paying for the overhead of some central office. It's just basically one guy with a bunch of humanitarian aid workers that are working overseas that are doing it. So it's really grassroots. Mm-hmm. You really can't, your dollar is actually going to a person. It's not like 75 cents of it is going to some office. So
yeah,
really great projects that are going on there. I used to sponsor projects too on my show. I should really start doing that again.
Oh, so dang. Yeah.
That's a good thing.
So I didn't have the original idea. No.
No, there are a lot of libertarians that have been doing that, and I think it's
right
just
on.
sort of our nature, you know.
Yeah.
You gotta be the change you want to see in the world, so they
Yeah.
say. So.
Well, and I was pissing and moaning about putting in 15 hours a week and not getting the returns that I wanted. But instead of pledging to me on Patreon, like no one from my show so far has given to DonorSee. And if you have, you haven't told me about it. So shame on you.
Shame.
Put your money where your mouth is, man. And it's been like 3 or 4 shows now I've been doing the plugs. So go over to DonorSee. Go to the show notes page at libertyweekly.net/78 and find that link, the DonorSee link, and go give some money, all right? And then email me, and I will give you, like, we'll have a whole big, like, to-do about it, okay? So, yeah, that's about it. Otherwise, the Amazon link, libertyweekly.net/Amazon, and that's all I can think of. So thanks for joining us. I really hope you enjoyed this great conversation, and please don't think I'm a whiny bitch. Later, guys. Peace.
Bye.